2 weeks ago, I released a video where I outlined exactly what I did over the summer, which was try to become a board game YouTube content creator. The reception to that video was super positive, and I really appreciate all the people that commented on that video and gave me encouragement, and it was really cool to see a lot of people come to the channel for the very first time saying, hey, I'd never seen you before. They got some of you watching my content, and I really appreciate that. I think that was really, really cool. One of the best things that came out of it was there was a significant amount of people commenting around this is something that they wanted to do, and maybe we're too scared to do it, or we're still thinking about it. And, you know, I thought about some of the content that I had enjoyed in the past on YouTube, and it was about people's journey and doing the thing that they want to do and kind of realizing dreams and in some cases failing. And it triggered a thought that maybe this is a series, or at least an intermittent update on progress that I'm making or challenges that I'm having in the YouTube space. So I'm going to do that. You know, a lot's happened in the last 2 weeks, and that's why I'm here already. This might not come every 2 weeks, but I think there's probably enough things to say. When I updated last, I was sitting at around 380 subscribers. Since then, in the last 2 weeks, that certainly has accelerated, largely because of the first video I did around this subject. So now I'm sitting around 640 subscribers. That's not everything, and one of the cool things that I started to see was an uptick in some of the other videos that I have done that maybe wouldn't have gotten the traffic before. Since then, I put out 3 other videos. One video on small box games that was significantly better than the first video I'd done on that, I believe a couple months ago. It got out of the gates and people really supported it, so, you know, that was great to see. I also did a video on a comparison between Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition and the new dice game, and that thing came out of the gates much better than most videos. And then I also did a preview overview of the Hoplomachus Victorum portion of the new Kickstarter for Pandora's Ruin, and that video is done really, really well also. So I have to think that, you know, there is a little bit of momentum behind the channel. The views are really good. You know, I think there's nothing to kind of complain about there. One of the big findings that I've had, or new learnings, is it's tough to hold a full-time job and also produce content. I'm proud in the last 2 weeks that I have been able to get these 3 videos out, but it's definitely been a challenge, as I expected. And I can definitely see that kind of hurting me pursuing this dream, but I'm going to keep grinding at it. One thing I'd mentioned in the last video is I want to design a board game, and I'd love to bring you all on that journey. So I'm taking steps already, at least learning a little bit about it. A couple books that I've already kind of dove into: Kobold's Guide to Board Game Design and A Theory of Fun. Both of these were on a board game design list. There's one more coming, and I can't remember off the top of my head. I plan to start kind of jumping in. I have some ideas already, which I won't share yet. I have to flesh them out just a little bit better, and I'd love to bring you all on the journey. If that's something exciting to you, let me know in the comments. Definitely worth working a full-time job. I have to really pick and choose where I'm going to put my effort, and if that's something that would interest you, please let me know, and that will help direct my efforts. On a side note, if anyone out there has designed a board game or has any resources that they think would be super helpful to me, let me know. Other books that I'm not reading, I'm jumping all in on that one. One big effort that I've taken is I started to reach out to board game publishers. So far, I've sent out 10 emails and basically introducing myself and expressing my want to cover a specific game. Typically, I'm basically reaching out to publishers that I've really enjoyed their games before, and I see something that's coming up that I would love to get access to bring you all content on. And I guess this might go on in the lost column for me over the last 2 weeks, but let me tell you where I'm at now. So one publisher gave me a 50% off coupon, which I did use, and that game eventually will come, and I'll let you know what that is when it does. I just don't want to call out the publisher right now. I did have one, which I'm really excited about, ask for my address and give a smiley face. So maybe that means I'll get my first review copy sent to me. We'll see how that goes. 7 others, no response whatsoever, which I totally expect with only a few hundred subscribers. But an interesting one that I want to share with you is Jamie Stegmeyer responded to me in a really thoughtful manner on BGG as I reached out to cover Apiary. And first and foremost was a no. because they don't take requests for specific games. But I think Jamie has probably done the most work around thoughtfully putting together information for not only new creators, but just creators in general as to how they can acquire review copies from Stonemaier. He gave me links to two different things, one in which is kind of some advice for a new board game creator, as well as Stonemaier's approach to dealing with content and review copies in 2023. Both of those are linked in the description. If you're interested at all, I highly recommend you reading those. There's some really good things buried in there. I'm not going to go through everything, but there were some core takeaways that I wanted to share in the spirit of sharing my learnings. The first link that I followed was basically advice for a new content creator wanting to review his games. And there's a couple questions or key things that he looks at when deciding whether or not to send out some review copies. How long have you been reviewing games? Can you stay consistent? Have you made it to the 5-month mark and demonstrated that consistency? What types of games are you reviewing? Obviously, you want to reach out to publishers that you like, and presumably you've been reviewing like games leading up to that point when you're reaching out to a publisher and asking them for a review copy. One point was, does he like your content? He also does mention that it's not a significant factor, but definitely a factor. Probably more likely to send review copies to content that he connects with. Did you review a previous copy that he had sent to you in the past? This is more for established creators. If he sent you a review copy and you haven't reviewed it up until this point, not likely he's going to send you another. Have you talked about his games in the past? Kind of a no-brainer there, right? Like if you've put up content for Stonemaier, it's probably more likely you're going to get a review copy in the future. Are you in the United States? It costs a lot of money to ship, so that's definitely a factor. And the one that's, I think is probably a factor for every single publisher out there. How big is your audience? Is there a return on investment by sending a $50, $60, $70, $100 game to you plus shipping? Are you going to reach enough people to make it worth it? He gives some points about establishing credibility. Reviewing the games you own obviously is going to build up credibility, build up a content library for other publishers to reference when they're making that decision. Also, if you really like a game, go and buy it. That is one in which is pretty obvious, but I think is kind of the first step for all of us wanting to start out in this space. And I'm going to foreshadow, I am going to touch on that in just a second. Ask for print and play for games on Kickstarter. Review free games at a friendly local game store or convention. Review digital copies of games on TTS or BGA. That's something I did with NAR recently, where I have no access to that game whatsoever, but I put out a preview or an overview that did really, really well. Write positives and negatives in every review. Obviously, if you want to build credibility with viewers, you don't want to be, pumping up every single game. If you get a free copy, make sure you review it. Take photos for written reviews. And when you publish something, definitely let the publisher know that you've put up a review. The big takeaway there is fairly simple. I really love that Jamie gave all of these ideas around establishing credibility before you kind of have that reach to be able to justify the business expense in sending you a game. With that said, the outcome is my reach probably is not far enough to get on that list. So I will continue to buy games and bring my perspective to you, which is totally fine. And that leads me to my next point, and big learning was I added up all of the expenses that this channel has brought via board game. I'm sweating a little bit here. Honey, if you're watching this is the time to kind of skip forward maybe a couple minutes because it's not pretty. So I will first preface by saying I would have bought a significant amount of games already. I had already been doing that. However, I definitely justified, and there was a significant increase to that spending because of this channel. And these totals are inclusive of games that are still on the way. In fact, today I have some that are arriving. I have to go grab that package before my wife sees it. And so in the few months that this channel has been live, I spent $1,029 on cardboard. Jamie, thanks for the advice. That is what I'm doing, and that is my bill. A big learning, and not something that I necessarily am surprised about, is this is a really expensive hobby to have. If you're not getting review games, you're spending a lot to kind of get games through the door and then spending a lot of your time to get them reviewed. And if you put a value on that time, there is a huge cost as a new content creator that doesn't have any sort of Patreon or any sort of funds coming from publishers, while you are that independent voice and people might trust it a little bit more than somebody that's getting paid or free copies, I will say it's not particularly sustainable for a long period, or at least that's where I'm going with this. Is I don't know how long I can spend $1,000 or more every few months to be able to bring board games in the door. Now, with that said, I can sell them and recoup a certain amount, but you know, after fees and shipping and all of that stuff to kind of sell them out, I mean, you're losing half the money there, and you don't have the game anymore. So, you know, it's definitely something that's I'm thinking a lot about on like long term. How is this sustainable? I honestly don't know. But this is an experiment that I'm going to keep pushing forward. And as long as my wife didn't watch that last part, I might be able to keep it going a little bit longer. I will also say that's not the total cost of running a channel. There is a huge rabbit hole that you can fall into around lighting. This light right here is new and it costs money. Your camera, I needed a camera that didn't have a record limit. This thing costs money. If you ever want to have any sort of top-down camera, you need a second one of those. And then you need to pay for subscriptions on editing. And then you need to have a computer fast enough to be able to edit things. This is a really expensive hobby to take up. Board gaming already was expensive, but then you have to buy kind of this ecosystem of gear to do it, and it can add up. I will say I started with an iPhone and natural light with an open window. That's all you really need to just get your voice out there. And I don't want this part to discourage anybody that wants to try this on their own. Like, look at my first videos. None of them had a light. All of them were filmed on an iPhone essentially. So you can do it. I'm just saying there is a rabbit hole that you can fall into if one of your priorities is quality. On a bit of a lighter note, and chalking this one up as a major win, I got some really great advice from Jared at 3 Minute Board Games around starting the content creation journey. And it's actually available for you to read. I will link the post down below. It's in response to a post that I did on BGG with the first video in this series, and Jared was nice enough to take his time and outline a lot of pitfalls and a lot of really great advice. And I've honestly have read that post or his comments probably 10 times at this point. And I want to read you just one excerpt from that I thought was really powerful and kind of steers me away from having the pressure of always producing things that are on the current hotness. 95% of board gamers don't follow Gen Con and Essen releases. They're playing Catan, Wingspan, and Dominion. They're not playing Isofarian Guard or whatever the big crowdfunding game is hot right now. However, 95% of content is made for those active superfans. Frosthaven got 80,000 backers on Kickstarter. Ticket to Ride has sold 8 million copies. Don't fall into the same trap most board game content creators fall into of thinking only the hotness matters. He also goes on to talk about some of his best videos of all time are on these very basic games. So people are looking for that content. I will say it's a little bit conflicting because what really gets me excited is frankly the stuff on the hotness. There are very few games I go back to time and time again. My brain is stimulated by newness, a new puzzle to solve, new themes, new art, all of that stuff. And that's one of the things that brought me into the hobby. So I'm definitely going to continue to chase the hotness. Not necessarily for views per se, because that's what I like. I really like those games and I really like the newness. So that's unfortunately not going to go away. And that bill I shared with you earlier is probably not going to reduce anytime soon. And speaking of content creators, there was a huge win last week. Rado on his weekly recap mentioned this little teeny tiny channel, and it really brought a ton of joy to me. I'm not going to go in depth in that experience. I shared a little bit about it in my Terraforming Mars review. Go check it out if you're interested. Just suffice it to say, I was walking on water that day, and that is definitely a win. So the biggest learning this week has been around stifling joy and also depression when it relates to how your channel is performing on YouTube. I went through incredible highs after publishing the video about my journey, but then it slowed down, and I've had some nice kind of spikes on performance and frankly dopamine. as I put out successive videos, but that wanes pretty quickly. And in fact, as I'm recording this now, the channel has kind of come to a halt over the last couple days. And I guess the point is, anything in life, try not to get so high and also so low, because I almost knew last Sunday after Rado had mentioned the channel that I was already dreading coming down off of that high. So, you know, and I did live in the moment and really did enjoy it and enjoyed kind of the growth of the channel had, but I knew it was going to slow at some point, and I'm doing my best at this point to not like connect my self-worth with this work, but frankly, it's difficult. It's difficult when you're putting everything into something and the return is inconsistent at that. So where do we go from here? There's probably like 5 or 6 games that I really want to get content out on. I'll be working on that today, in fact. I'm going to continue to kind of be in my research phase on kind of board game design. Like I said, if anyone's out there that would like to help direct some of my learning time, I'd love that. I'd love any resources that have worked for you. And lastly, the idea of a podcast and interviewing people around the industry selfishly would help me learn more so I can continue to kind of grow in this space. I'd also just love the format and love kind of the casual talk without the pressure of putting together quick, snappy edits. So I'm in the research phase of that as well. And if you've made it this far, I really appreciate it. I appreciate you getting through my ramblings and musings. If this at all created any value for you, let me know in the comments. I was really encouraged by the other people that want to go on this same journey. For those people, I'm only like 1 or 2 steps ahead of you. I would say my advice is just hit record and kind of get out there. Stop thinking about it. But regardless, thank you. Thank you for being along on this journey, and have a great day.